Good morning. I will start this meeting of the Transportation Public Works today, October 7th, 2014. I'm Councilmember Reich. I'll be chairing the committee. I'm joined by committee members, Councilmember Yang, Glidden, Palmisano, and Gordon. We are a quorum and can proceed with today's agenda. I will note the addendum, which is the last item, which will be a discussion item, item 9. We have the remaining items are consent items and 2 public hearings. I will go through the public hearing or the consent items. Any committee members can pull any item for discussion if they wish. Item 3, the first item on the consent agenda is the traffic signal maintenance agreement. Authorize execution of an agreement with the University of Minnesota to perform maintenance and operation on traffic signal system at Harvard Street Southeast and Beacon Street Southeast. Item 4 is to authorize the extension of the contract with Custom Product Services, increasing the contract amount by $714,872 for Special Service District sidewalk snow clearing and ice control for the 2014-2015 winter season. That item will be referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Item 5 is authorize amendment to the contract with Sunram Construction Incorporated, increasing the contract by $59,848 for stormwater pond dredging. Item 6 is regards the Central Corridor Green Line LRT project. Authorize execution of a support and funding agreement 25 with the Metropolitan Council, allowing the Metropolitan Council to reimburse the city for traffic signal work at Cedar Avenue, Riverside Avenue in conjunction with the Central Corridor LRT project, and to authorize proper city officers to execute endorsement of the federal fiscal year 2014 Federal Transit, also known as the FTA certification, and assurances with the Metropolitan Council for the Central LRT project. That item will be referred to Ways and Means as well. Item 7 is to authorize an increase in the engineering materials and testing fund by $180,000 for the purchase of drilling machine truck and mounting drill machine. That item will be referred to Ways and Means. The following items are accept single bid of Central Mine Equipment Incorporated in the amount of $134,185 to furnish and deliver boring and subsurface exploration drilling machine, and to accept a single bid of Vite Disposal Systems for an estimated annual expenditure of $74,600 for the disposal and construction debris and miscellaneous waste through December 31st, 2015. And as that was a single bid, we did compare it with other pricing from other years, and it was consistent. Does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move all items. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. Those items are approved and will be forwarded to full council. Public hearings. We have the first public hearing today is the water sewer service line repair and replacement. Director Kaki.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We have Rock Rogers here this morning from our water treatment distribution that will make a very quick introduction to this first public hearing associated with water and service lines, and then you can certainly open it up and we'll take any testimony.
All right, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. Rock Rogers, Supervisor, Water Permits and Connections. We are here today for the water service lines for various customers in the city of Minneapolis that their service lines were in need of repair, and the city of Minneapolis oversaw those repairs with some private plumbers, and the repairs were completed at that time.
Thank you. Any questions per the presentation? Seeing none, I'll also note we're joined by Councilmember Bender. I will open the public hearing. We do have people who signed in with the clerk. I will go in order. Please forward to the podium and stating your name and address for the record. I'll begin with John Turns.
Morning, folks. My name's John Turnus, 3335 Central. And I'm out of my league this morning, so you'll have to forgive me a little. I've got a water line that broke and an assessment for $14,000, and my attorney would be here speaking for me today, but he had another case scheduled, and I believe you've got his letter in front of you. And there's a whole lot of things here, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with the whole history of the water thing, but historically this until 1992 or 4 was the responsibility of the city for the water line to the stop box, and from the stop box to the house was the homeowners, and you guys changed that by ordinance, which our position is that was rather shaky legal grounds to make that change. And it's not that I don't want to play with you guys nicely, but I can't. And there's been no case law as to support this, and there may be. And that's all up to you. I'm willing to go negotiate on the price, but I don't have the money to get off $14,000 because you want to shift the burden onto me. And that's on basically what it amounts to is a private, you're expecting me to put my private water line through public property, and it's just shaky. So I don't know if you want to negotiate or what we're going to do here.
Well, we'll take your comment for purpose of the public hearing. Ev will take other people who make comments regarding their property. Staff can make general comments in reaction to that, but if there are any specific things, staff will be available and you can go to the hallway and discuss with them after the public hearing.
After the hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome. Moving down the line, we have Molly Lyons. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Yeah, if you wish to speak directly with staff, that's perfectly fine. Okay, thank you. I will go down the list. John Rulland, close.
Yeah, I'm not good at public speaking, so I gotta read it. I'm John Rulland, the taxpayer of the property at property ID 24029, 2412-0054, located at 1110 12th Avenue Southeast and described as Lot 28, Elwell, Second Edition. Lived at this address for 37 years and owned it for 35 years. I'm here to object and comment on my parcel having a water service line repair assessed to me. My story starts on December 29th when the Minneapolis Department of Public Works sent me a letter outlining the need for a tunnel repair project. The access for this repair work is a shaft hole about 100 feet from where my water line needed repairing. The City of Minneapolis then contracted with a company to come out and document cracks and separations in our house walls and foundations within 300 feet of the tunnel project. This was to protect the city from frivolous claims, and I understand that. The shaking and moving that I felt inside my house, even with windows and doors closed, was considerable during the initial years of construction. Since the start of that construction 5 years ago, there has been a constant stream of heavy vehicles coming and going to service the needs of installing a 10-foot diameter shaft 100 feet deep and repairing the stormwater tunnel beneath it. Nearly all of the vehicles accessing and associated with the tunnel repair have to cross over the road above my water line. My water line leak was at the curb stop, according to the repair crew. They said the soil was very wet from the leaking at that location. Normally, the curb stop would not have traffic driving over it because it is located in the boulevard between the curb and the sidewalk. Unfortunately, that is not the case for some of the vehicles at my location. Even after repair, I was able to take pictures of tire tracks in the mud made on both the curb and the sidewalk side within very few inches of my newly repaired curb stop. One of the sets of the tire tracks was from a set of dually tires, meaning that it was not from a lightweight vehicle. My plea is that I not have to pay for repairs that were caused, in my opinion, by heavy equipment driving on my curb stop in a boulevard and dislodging the water service line. Drop in water pressure was immediate and very noticeable. It occurred the same day that a project to more efficiently connect the dewatering well to the stormwater drain was completed. This project was about 60 feet from my water line break. I have another concern as well. How do I stop vehicles in the future from driving on my boulevard, crushing the curb stop, and needing to replace my water line again? Been informed by the city engineer, Joe Klua, in charge of planning and engineering, in charge of the tunnel project, that they will continue returning each winter to rehab portions of the tunnel until probably 2017. I am certain that there will be times that heavy equipment vehicles will swing wide to move into position and again run over my curb stop without even giving it a second thought. Repair cost of $48.50, even assessed over 5 years, is a real budget buster for me, and of about $500 in each of the 2 yearly property tax statements. This is going to hurt. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Want to see any of the pictures?
You can submit those to the clerk or share them with specific staff people. Thank you. Moving down the line, Amy Lewis, please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Amy Lewis, the owner at 4649 2nd Avenue South. And in the fall of 2011, our sidewalks were replaced in front of the house. There were 3 sections of sidewalk replaced in front of my property. And doing this, the trucks doing the work also drove up on the boulevard, leaving huge tire marks and gouges in the boulevard. At that time that the work was being done, I did call the city to complain about how horrible this looked in the just the deep tracks. And all they were able to do is to put grass seed over it. And it grew back. But then over the winter, my water bill was estimated. But in the spring, when I got the actual water bill, it was very, very high. And so this was the spring of 2012, I called the city to go, what's going on? This can't be correct. The water bill is so much higher. And they suggested that perhaps there was a leak. And it was determined then in the summer of 2012 that there was a leak from the water main in the street up to the property. I noted that it was very possible that I thought that the trucks driving over the boulevard could have damaged that water line, especially since I had noted that the shutoff valve seemed to stick up higher. It was sticking up a few inches off the ground than it had been before. I called the city. I spoke to someone who recommended that I contact the people who had been contracted to do the work, which I did. And they said that, as they did the work, they contacted me and noted that the pipe was bent at the wipe joint or at the shutoff valve, that there were tire tracks going over the shutoff valve as well as all around it, and that a pipe was actually bent and the wipe joint was damaged. And they did issue me a letter stating that when they did the work, that they noted that there were these deep gouges and tire marks that I had previously complained about, and that in their opinion, those were responsible for the actual bending of the pipe joint, which caused the leak. And so I would like to contest this. I feel that the city or the trucks that did the work were responsible for the repair, and I should not have to pay for it.
Very good. And just as the other gentleman is very similar, he was sharing that information with the specific staff people. We have staff available to review those documents.
Would that be like after this is all done or now?
Yeah.
Or?
That gentleman over there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Susan Olson, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Susan Olson. I live at 5248 12th Avenue South, and I'm going to have Michael Toodlewall speak for me.
Well, we're contesting the charge for the sewer put in on Susan's property in 2012 due to the fact that the city was charging this property probably since the 1930s or 40s for a sewer system that was never into her house. She had a private sewer system in her house. Is anybody aware of that? We were here a year ago and talked about this. And then we met with John Quincy, the alderman for the district, and it was kind of left at that. They never got back to us on anything that was going to, anything that was going to happen on that. So I was hoping that everybody would be up to speed on what was going on or not.
Yeah, I think with that specific situation, you just share that with staff so they can figure out what the solution would be. Have you interfaced with any of the specific technical staff that we have here today?
Well, I met last year when we were up here. I met with Brad there, Mr. Blackhawk, also after that meeting, and then we got together with the councilman after that, or alderman, I guess you call them. Our dispute is that the city charged this piece of property probably back in the 1940s when the road went in, and there was never a sewer line to that house. It was a septic system in there. So when my sister-in-law bought the house in 2000, it was all checked out, and nobody thought anything of it, that, okay, it's getting billed for city sewer and water, it's gonna be hooked up to city sewer and water. Well, in 2012, she had a clog that we sent the plumbers out to see what was going on to fix it. And after, digging up stuff, and they found a septic tank back there. And there was no sewer line going to the street. So that's how this whole thing got started. It's like, okay, there is no sewer line going to the street, but this property is being getting charged for the sewer line for 70 years or more. So our dispute is that she would have never bought this house, or would at least would have negotiated with the previous owner to have a sewer line put in the house. Now we feel she's not responsible for that bill because the city has been charging that piece of property for a sewer line, sewer charges all these years. So they've reaped the benefits of monthly payments from all those people that have lived in that house for that many years. That money has been collected and used for whatever it's been used for, and now she has to pay the bill for, it was some error way back when that the city started charging this property for sewer, and they've gotten all that money for that. Why should she have to pay for the bill because of their mistake that somebody made and started charging that piece of property for sewer charges on it?
Good. Well, in the conclusion of the testimony, we'll have staff respond to items with which they're familiar and which they have information. Anything more detailed than that, you're encouraged to interface with them and try to find resolution.
Okay, so I guess we did that a whole year ago. Now we're back here again, and nothing's happened. So I mean, we go back to the staff, talk to them again, and then then what's going to happen? We're going to be here because we're disputing it, and they say it's not their fault. So we're going to go back and forth on it for the next 20 years, and every year we're going to come by here and complain about it. It just doesn't make any sense that you being the council. I think you should have some input on saying, well, why this property is being charged for this many years, collecting money for it, and she has to pay out of her pocket to put a sewer system in. Now, I mean, this was a year, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but this was a year ago we started this thing, and now it seems like nobody here even knows what's going on. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
We will hear staff's response at the conclusion of the testimony, and the committee will be able to hear that and respond to the staff response to your testimony.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Diamond, come forward, state your name and address for the record.
I'm Pamela Diamond, and we live at 1941 Irving Avenue South, the corner of Franklin and Irving. And I'm here to contest a water assessment. Last October, the main line on the intersection of Franklin and Irving burst open, and there was lots of activity. And we are one of the corner houses right next to the main water line. And so there was a lot going on, and I was out of town at the time when the real heavy equipment started coming in, but my daughter, adult daughter, was watching our home, and I asked her to go outside and talk to the workers and figure out what was going on. And she talked to Tim Green. Coincidentally, about a day later, our water line burst as well. We weren't aware of it because the pressure didn't drop, so it wasn't apparent to us, but they asked to come in and see the situation and determine that our water line had also burst. So my request is that this is investigated a little bit more. Tim said this is highly unusual, and they've never seen this happen before. So it's a quote from him. And so we're wondering if one affected the other. We know all the water lines on our street. Well, we've now learned that we're responsible for them. I don't think many of our neighbors know. But we wonder if the pressure caused pressure on our line, causing it to burst, and all the work that was going on. Like the other people, lots of heavy digging deep, lots of things going on. So that's, and what do you suggest?
Again, we have staff available to look at the specific
Okay,
situation,
I
and then
talked to
also
them.
make general comments to all the testimony today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. John McCarty, come forward. Name and address for the record.
Morning. My name's John McCarty, and my property address is 620 East Street South. And this is a parking lot downtown Minneapolis. There's no water service on this property. No water service, no sewer service, and we don't get a water bill. And apparently what happened is there was some water line break in the middle of the street, and the city came out and repaired the water line break. And just for information, in discussion with the water department, this water line is from the late 1800s. And in any case, the water line broke, and they decided that it was my responsibility to pay $7,198 to repair this water line in the middle of the street, which, I mean, we have some neighboring properties, HCMC and the House of Charity and, some other properties in the neighborhood that all have water service. But they've figured that it was my responsibility to pay this. So, which wouldn't be bad, but what happened is in November 2009, the exact same thing happened. And and I have photographs from 2009 where, the water's leaking in the middle of the street, and the city gave me notice that they were going to go and make this repair, and so I was able to come down there, and I got the photographs of the city repairing this 120-year-old water line, and that's in the middle of the street. And so, of course, I've been paying an assessment for this repair that happened in 2009. The city in January, when they made this repair, they didn't even give me notice. They didn't tell me that it went, they just sent me this bill that I'm going to have to pay. So what I would suggest is that there's a water line in the middle of this street, and it's extremely old. I'm not connected to it in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think that it's just or right, for that matter, that the city gives us, or just asks me to pay the bill. I think the problem's, I don't want to be charged, 5 years from now when it breaks again. So I'd like to get some relief from you guys. So I want to just thank you for your public service.
Thank you for your testimony, and staff will make comment when we conclude with all the testimony. We'll do it all in one group. And we still have a few more people who signed in. Moving down the list, we have Chester Gorey. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good.
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Chester Gorey, and my property is at 3239 Colfax Avenue North, and it was a broken sewer line that had to be replaced. First of all, I am a 100% disabled vet, total and permanent. So any relief you could provide with that would be deeply appreciated. There was sort of like a perfect storm of things that happened around this that's kind of inhibiting me from paying. There were some serious cracks in my foundation, so I had to call a structural engineer. And so they determined that probably from the tornado that came through there, that there was some shifting of the house or something that went on, that the foundation had to be repaired. So it cost $20,000 to repair the foundation that I'm paying for. And also I had to, in November, I had to put on a new roof. That was $8,000. And of course, with a new roof comes new gutters, and that's another $2,000. And so while this was happening this summer, the house is jacked up. We're doing the foundation. My adult children move back home and they have babies. So we have other relatives coming in to see the new baby, and when it just needs your shower and your bathroom and your house up to optimal operation, the sewer line breaks. So we needed circus music. It was crazy. And so they had to come in and repair the sewer line, and they said that the water line was put on top of the sewer line. So they said they hadn't seen that before, and that might have contributed to the sewer line collapsing the way it did at that point. And the cost to repair the sewer line is $1,600 more than the estimate. So any relief you can provide, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. The last person I have signed in is Joan Ebersold. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. You can submit that to the clerk. Thank you.
I live at 442729 Thomas Avenue South, and I ended up with a broken sewer line, and I think it was through negligence of my neighbor. My sewer line goes straight out to the street. I was unaware that his, in olden days, connected to mine. He, without a permit, without any inspection, without speaking to the city, had water in his basement. One year they tried a shutout valve. That didn't work. He still had water in his basement, and he's a non-resident landlord. He owns multi-million dollars of rental property around, so it wasn't on the top of his concerns, quite honestly. At any rate, he had someone come out and repair the sewer. I don't know if they were plumbers. They were friends of his. They certainly didn't go by OSHA standards. Again, no license, no permit, no nothing. At any rate, and when they were doing the lining, all of a sudden, I ended up with water in my basement a few months later, and I had my sewer cleaned out of roots 90 feet out with no problem. I had been taking care of that. In the end, I had to have it cambered by 3 different companies. I had to have the sewer line repaired. Brad Blackhawk's office was most accommodating and helpful, but at any rate, I had to have a new sewer replaced. He would not participate. He would not speak to me. His management company would not speak to me. So at any rate, I couldn't cut him off from a sewer, and if I would have gone out and replaced a completely new sewer of my own, it would have cost much more, and I'm on Social Security, and I thought, being a businessman, you would realize that perhaps you would cause the damage and we could repair the sewer accordingly. He will not speak to me. He will not let me on his property. He will not return my phone calls, and he says that just because he owns a lot of property, he knows how things are done, and that is not right. I think through his negligence, I was damaged. I spent a lot of time finding out what the problem was. I repaired the problem, and I think that somewhere it should go on record that he is just plain, I don't want to say being a bully, but he takes no responsibility. And there were 5 tenants there, always compared to me and myself, me and then one other person who, having lived there since the 70s, had no problem. I give you the timeline there, but in the conclusion, I didn't do a very good job, but I did get damaged, and I certainly would like him to participate in paying for it, which he says he will not, but at least I would acknowledgement from the city that there should have been responsibility on his part.
Thank you for your testimony, and staff will look into your timeline and proceed accordingly. I believe that concludes. Does anyone else wish to testify? Anyone else to testify? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and have staff come forward to make whatever their general comments in reaction to the testimony today, knowing that more detailed resolution would be done offline.
Mr. Chair and committee, thank you. Regarding the property at 3335 Central Avenue Northeast, the service line in Central Avenue was leaking. We do have city ordinance number 509340 that states that the service line is owned by the service property that it serves. The original permit that was taken up from the original owner requested the permission to tap into the city water main. This is from the property to the main. Therefore, We know that the service was expensive as far as the bids that went out for this particular property due to the fact that Central Avenue has a lot of utilities in the street. And we did send this out for bid, and the bids came back. Again, we say that this property is serviced by the property that the owner owns the property that it serves. Regarding 1110 12th Avenue Southeast, at this time, we're not ready to respond. Again, for 4649 2nd Avenue South, we're not ready to respond for that one either. 1941 Irving Avenue South, again, we'll need to investigate that further. The property at 620 8th Street South, also known as 720 Park Avenue, the service line was stubbed into the curb. The original tap was 1891. Again, that property owner requested to tap into the city of Minneapolis' water main. The reason the property did not have a water bill is because it was only stubbed to the curb for water availability, just in case they needed access if they were planning to build that particular building at that time. However, it was not done. There's many out there in the city of Minneapolis that are just stubbed to the curb, and by ordinance, the property owner still owns that service line.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On a few of the properties, you said that you're not ready to respond, and I'm wondering, is that because you don't have the information, or is that because you don't know what the law is with regards to those specific cases, or what?
The reason for that is that the two that we were able to respond did contact us, and we were able to investigate. The other three, we have not investigated.
And so with regards to those other three, you'll spend the time to investigate those cases and actually get back to the owners then?
We will.
Okay.
Councilmember Glidden, followed by Councilmember Gordon.
Thanks. And I can either make a motion, or I don't know if you were prepared to make a motion, but I would just suggest that we then, for those three properties identified as requiring further investigation, I guess my preference would be that we have a forward without recommendation on those three properties, since we are going to be investigating them. And for those property owners who are still here, this will be forwarded to the full city council, which meets not this Friday, but next Friday. And so we would anticipate that there will be contact with you before next Friday.
Yeah, that's the motion that I was going to make.
Wonderful.
So that motion has been made. We'll continue the conversation with the motion before us. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. I was just curious about our, we offer a deferment option for people who qualify. Could you explain that a little bit so I could understand what that means?
The deferment is not through our department. That would be through a different department. What we offer is the assessment possibility of a 5-year assessment if council will approve. The deferment is not through the city of Minneapolis Water Department.
Okay, well, I understand that we do offer a deferment for senior people who are 65 years or older, or who are retired because of a permanent disability.
Yes.
And a deferment means that the payment can be delayed and postponed, or we just defer it till the house is sold. Do you know the details on that?
I do not. That, again, is not through the city of Minneapolis Water Department. That's, I believe, through Sue Armstead. She deals with the deferment.
Well, it would be something that people might want to pursue. I know there's an application process. We might also, as a council, might want to look at this and see if it's something that we want to think about expanding. If we have vets who are partially disabled, I think there's a couple of the cases here that they indicated they were, and I don't know the ages of these individuals, but I think that's an opportunity that people could pursue. The one on Central Avenue does seem pretty striking to me. Looking at it, it's 3 times what most people, you know, the repairs, there's something going on there, and I can appreciate the hardship. I also just want to note for all of us here that There are some cities that offer a low-interest loan program to help with sewer and line repairs. There's also some cities, like Baltimore has a program where they promote it, where people actually, the city helps them buy insurance. So the city will help them pay $9 a month or $5 a month in case they come up with these sewer repairs. I just know as a homeowner, before I ever got in government here, I was always struck by, why am I responsible for what's out there in the right of way? Just so this company, the city, can sell me their product, why isn't that box and that meter and that pipe theirs? Why does, you know, so, but I understand it isn't, and we've set it up that way. But for me, I think, just as a regular person, I guess, then it might be not a smart idea for us to help facilitate people to be able to keep those lines going so we can sell them more water. I don't have a staff direction or anything now because I don't think we have we don't have any kind of loan program that could help people with these payments except for having it assessed. Is that correct?
Through water, correct.
Through water. And do you know if the city has any kind of a insurance program that we help people buy or that we facilitate?
We do not, sir.
Maybe the city engineer has a, Mr. Kaki.
Mr.
Okay, we've broadened the policy discussion. Director Kaki.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, no, we don't offer insurance. There are a number of private sector companies out there that do offer insurance for both utility lines, sewer, and water that residents can purchase if they want to cover these types of expenses. But we do, as a city, we do not offer that.
Thanks, and I appreciate that we've gone a little bit far afield with these individual cases, but this is sometimes the only time I think council members start to think about what's the policy around this, and is there something we could do? And maybe one of the tricks would be just to promote what's already available somehow. I don't know, but thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I was just noticing how this seems like an unusually high number of people coming to testify, and sometimes, you know, what happens in these situations is that, you know, I counted the number of properties that were being assessed, you know, and I'm just thinking, were there other complaints that didn't show up today, but I guess made their ways to, you know, your office or other places with regards to these two assessments?
Well, there was a number of service line leaks for this year. I believe we had over 200 service line leaks. We had conversations with the particular property, and because of the ordinance that state that the service line is owned by their property, there was really not a lot of objections to that. The parties that are here today, different circumstances for why they believe their service lines leak, but these service lines are relatively old, sometimes over 100-some years old, and they just leave.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the folks who showed up today are fairly unique compared to the other maybe 180 or so folks who didn't show up today, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Gordon? No. Yeah, I mean, magnitude of scale, I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of miles of infrastructure, and this would reflect a very small fraction of that, so not inconsistent with what one would expect, at least statistically. So any further questions? We have a motion before us made by Councilmember Glidden. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. Thank you very much. Go on to our second public hearing of the day, and that is regarding the Special Service District's proposed services and service charges for 2015.
Mr. Chair, we have Andrew Carlson here that will introduce this item and move into the public hearing.
Yep. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members. My name is Andrew Carlson. I'm the project manager for Special Service Districts. Today we have the Uptown, Dinkytown, Central Avenue, Stadium Village, Nicollet Avenue, South Hennepin Avenue, Chicago Avenue South, and Linden Hills Special Service Districts seeking approval of their 2015 proposed services and service charges. These 8 districts, plus the 7 approved back in September, are shown on the map I've put on the overhead there. So for a total of 15 special service districts. Back in June, Public Works staff worked with each district's advisory board to recommend the services, prepare estimated budgets, and review their assessment methodologies for the coming year. These service charges will be collected on their 2015 real estate taxes in the same manner as special assessments. Each affected property owner was mailed a notice of public hearing with the service charge amount 10 days in advance of the public hearing. Staff therefore recommends the following: passage of the summary publication of a resolution for the Uptown, Dinkytown, Central Avenue, Stadium Village, Nicollet Avenue, South Hennepin Avenue, Chicago Avenue South, and Linden Hills Special Service Districts, approval of the proposed services and budget cost estimates in the lump sum total of $1,133,500 for 2015, approval of the special services and the list of service charges in the lump sum amount of $1,076,560 for 2015. Direct the city clerk to transmit certified copies of the list of service charges to the Hennepin County Auditor, and finally direct the city engineer to proceed with the work.
Thank you very much. Any questions per the staff outline? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. This is a public hearing for the special service districts as described in the staff presentation. Do we have anyone sign up? Do not have anyone signed up. Does anyone wish to speak? Does anyone wish to speak? I will see none. I will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? I will move the item as described by the staff report. Any discussion from committee members? Councilmember Gordon? Oh, no. Seeing none, I will move that as described, special service district proposal, proposed services and service charges for 2015. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We now go into our final item on today's agenda. This will be the sole discussion item, and it's the promoting equity through and around improved transit services. This will be an item before us for discussion for the committee.
Mr. Chair, we have Jean Ranieri, our Director of Intergovernmental Relations, who will introduce the item.
Morning.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much and good morning. My name is Jean Ranieri. I'm the Director of Government Relations. And based on the staff directive of about a month ago, we were asked to coordinate the activities to put together the response to the equity commitment request from groups of organizations in the city. To do that, we worked very closely with both the Department of Community Development, CPED, and Public Works. Mr. Chair, if I could, I would like to thank the folks, if it's possible, just the staff who worked on this. Mr. Kotke and his staff, including John Wirchis, Jenny Hager, and the Flintoff Don Flom. For Mr. Greg Taylor and CPED, Kathy Pulaski, Beth Grossen, Beth Elliott, Kristen Guild, Jack Byers, Mark Brinda, Paul Mogish, and Miles Mercer. Also my staff, and a special thank you to Sharon Garcia, who tried to put all this together. So what we'd like to do, today is make this a two-part presentation. Both presentations will be by mayor's staff. Peter Wagenius will talk about the transit issues, and then Eric Garcia Luna will talk about the economic development and housing issues. And there's a document, I think it's on your machines, and also a hard copy distributed. And I think if you have any questions, I think we could probably take them as we go through, or wait till the end.
Very good. Well, let's proceed.
Jennifer is going to unlock me here so I can pull up a PowerPoint. Being that this is the Transportation and Public Works Committee, we'll go through the transit and transit-oriented development sections in as little or as much detail as you require. If needed, some of the other issues can extend to further deliberations at committee of the whole. I'd like to begin by reading directly from the values and commitments section, which is the introduction to the equity report. After that, I'll go through a series of slides to hit the main points. Minneapolis is already a very diverse city. It is one of our greatest strengths as a community in an increasingly interconnected global economy. Today, 40% of the city is non-white. The Minneapolis Public Schools enrollment in 2012-2013 is 70% non-white. Minneapolis and our future workforce will become even more diverse in the future. While not unique to Minnesota, the disparities between whites and people of color in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan region are among the worst in the nation in housing, employment, health, and education. While our region's economy is growing better than most cities, this growth is not closing the gaps that hold back our city and our region. To be the community we want to be, the city seeks to lead in shifting from growth to inclusive growth. Addressing the gaps through and around transit and development alone, of course, will not end these racial and economic disparities. But we cannot reduce these disparities without a significant transportation component. We cannot achieve inclusive growth without a comprehensive transit system that works for all. When it comes to transit, the city of Minneapolis has supported an all-of-the-above approach. We want and support new high-speed transit service. We're talking about all-day high-speed access to and from outer ring suburbs so that it is easy for people from all across the region to work and play in downtown Minneapolis. And for Minneapolis residents, including people who rely on affordable public transit for access to jobs outside of the city. For such projects to benefit low-income people and people of color seeking new employment opportunities, such transit projects must provide reliable, frequent, all-day service to accommodate all hours of employment. This is why Minneapolis supports LRT and highway BRT projects. Many of the peak hour commuter service is in effect one-way service today, and we want that to change. We want that service to allow Minneapolis residents to access jobs outside of Minneapolis. Number two, we also support improved service on existing corridors. The city supports investments to improve the quality, speed, frequency, safety, reliability, and economic development impact of underserved transit corridors that have frankly been taken for granted in the past. Chronic underinvestment in urban transit corridors serving low-income residents and communities of color has left human potential and neighborhood potential untapped to the detriment, we think, of the whole region. That is why the city supports specific improvements for the city's most efficient and least subsidized transit corridors, including Broadway, Penn Avenue North, Emerson Fremont Avenues North, and Fremont Avenues North, Nicollet, Central Avenue Northeast, Chicago Avenue South, and the Midtown Lake Corridor. Investments in these corridors, which are far less expensive than LRT lines, will feed reliable ridership to the larger and more expensive spines, helping the whole system work at its full potential. Finally, the city supports both transit-oriented development and development-oriented transit. The city does not want to simply provide access so that low-income people and communities of color can find jobs outside of the communities in which they live. Bringing jobs to people is good, but it is not enough. We must also bring jobs to people. The city of Minneapolis views public transit investment as an effective and essential tool for sustainable and equitable development, a tool to grow jobs, housing, and economic development in Minneapolis and along revitalized urban corridors. With that in mind, as we proceed, this document includes commitments that the city is making to the communities that have asked for an equity response from us. I'm going to recount 3 of those commitments. My colleague Eric Garcia Luna is going to add 2 more when we get to his portion of the presentation. 3 of our commitments are that we will work to ensure that as the city of Minneapolis continues to grow, that growth is truly inclusive of all and serves to reduce existing disparities. 2, that we will work with and advocate alongside of residents of Minneapolis, neighborhood groups, and advocacy organizations. 3, that we will get the best outcome within the constraints identified at the Van White Station, ideally a shared vision of mixed-use, mixed-income development, including affordable rental and home ownership options. So now having gone through the introduction, I'll attempt to hit the highlights of the report. First, it's important to understand who are the transit decision makers. In the city of in this region, Metropolitan Council, through its transit division, Transit, operates or contracts for most of the public transit service in the metropolitan area. Met Council is also in charge of transit planning, design, and construction. The Minnesota legislature has granted the Met Council authority to operate and plan for regional transit. CTIB, the county's Transitway Improvement Board, also has a significant decision-making role, funding authority over major capital investments. That also derives from the legislature and the governor. Finally, the federal government obviously plays a huge role. Up to 50% of Hiawatha, Central, and Southwest have been or are anticipated to be paid for by the Federal Transit Administration. So what in this is the city's role? If the city is not a provider of transit or a decision maker on transit expenditures, what is our role? First and foremost, our role is advocacy. We are advocates right along with community members for serving our communities. While we don't have the resources of Met Council, we do engage in planning, a lot of it. We deal with development. We deal with development decisions after transit decisions have already been made, unfortunately, because sometimes we wish we were at the table in a decision-making capacity earlier because development might be easier. Obviously, we provide municipal consent on certain projects, but that is inherently, as you know from Southwest, a negative process. We have used that to great effect in advancing transit on 35W. I want to emphasize that while the city is not a transit provider or a direct transit decision maker, we have not been passive. The fact that we are not at the table deciding how transit dollars are spent does not mean that we have been in any way passive in advocating for our communities. The federal role, the federal funding formula is something you have to abide by it if you expect to get projects and dollars to come to your region. This played a direct role in Southwest LRT and the decision about how it was routed. In 2009 and before 2009, the federal formula was focused almost exclusively on new riders. Frankly, that creates a bias against neighborhoods where people already take transit. The Obama administration announced in early 2010 that they were going to change the formula to value all riders. They actually came, the Federal Transit Administration, President Obama's Secretary of Transportation actually came to Minnesota, came to the city of St. Paul to announce the formula change here. They said they did it in part to advance streetcar projects and also so as to provide a victory for the Stops for Us campaign in the city of St. Paul, which added 3 stops to the Central Corridor line, which would not have been possible under the old formula. Unfortunately, the Southwest LRT decision about mode was made before, only a few months before, but before the Obama administration announced that the formula was changing. The map that we have in front of you, which is included in the report, shows mode share, where along both the Kenilworth line, which was chosen, and the alternative, which had been studied, where people ride transit. And you'll see that the corridor that was chosen is not where mode share is high. It's where mode share is about as low in the city as one can find. That means there are limitations of the Kenilworth alignment. Ideally, rail stations, think about this, the intersections that the city of Minneapolis would most likely to provide high quality, even rail transit service to. We would like to serve urban intersections like Broadway and Penn, or Nicollet and Lake, which are surrounded by neighborhoods where many people already take transit. Again, under the old formula, the system was biased against bringing service to those communities. Part of the reason that the city has advanced plans to improve transit service, including rail transit to intersections like Broadway and Penn, or, for example, Nicollet and Lake, is that they're very amenable to development. They have exactly these characteristics that we would be seeking. They're accessible, they're easy to find, and they have available land for development and job growth. As you saw from the map we just looked at, and here's another one, the Kenilworth alignment carries limitations. The previous map was a map of mode share. This is a map of density. It's also a map of walk scores. you'll notice that along corridors like Nicollet and Midtown, the walk scores are 98, 98, 88, 83, 97, 95 out of 100. These are very accessible urban locations. You'll see that along Southwest LRT, some of the walk scores are as low as 48 and 52. So if that's the bad news, here's the good news. The good news is Southwest LRT will nonetheless benefit equity by significant overall improvement to the regional transit system. In particular, we want to point out that Central LRT was designed around advancing equity, around communities of color, around serving dense urban neighborhoods. And more good news, Central LRT and Southwest LRT will be in the future a single interlined train. For example, you will be able to get on the train in Hopkins and get off at the University of Minnesota without changing trains, or get on in the West Bank and get off at a job in St. Louis Park, again, without changing trains. So if that's the good news, here's what's unknown and the focus of much of the city's efforts. If the region invests in priority transit corridors in Minneapolis that connect with the Green Line, the combined Central and Southwest LRT line, then Southwest could definitely advance equity and benefit Minneapolis neighborhoods. Southwest LRT is a spine. Connections to that spine should include more frequent local regular buses, several faster enhanced bus or arterial BRT lines, and also modern streetcars on a few key developable corridors. So with that, I'd like to switch the focus away from Southwest LRT and to North Minneapolis. Both indicated by its name, Southwest, and the history of its development, Southwest LRT was not designed around serving North Minneapolis. Through the city's transportation planning and advocacy efforts, the city has attempted to answer the question, how can we best serve the residents of North Minneapolis? Our vision for transit improvements in North Minneapolis is embodied in part in Access Minneapolis, the city's 10-year transportation action plan, which was approved in 2009. It is rooted in the knowledge that transit is about moving people from point A to point B, but it's not just about that. Transit should also be about economic development. Economic development happens at rail stations. And I want to emphasize this point. Chair Reich, you understand this better than most. It is sometimes suggested that development happens along rail lines. That's not quite true. Development happens along stations on rail lines. If development happened along rail lines, then the Northeast Minneapolis would be celebrating all the economic development that they are getting out of the North Star commuter rail line. But of course they're not, because there are no stations. Rail in and of itself does not spur economic development. Accessible stations on rail lines spur and catalyze economic development. For these reasons, the city of Minneapolis was disappointed when the recommended alignment for Bottineau LRT had only 2 stations in North Minneapolis. Frankly, we noticed a lot of similarities to Southwest LRT. What we had before us was a very fast route between suburban and downtown destinations, but few stations in the places where density was the highest, where low-income populations and communities of color are the greatest. It's certainly a project that provides great regional benefit, again, like Southwest, but a spine without high-quality connections, at least at that point in time. At that time, only one enhanced bus or arterial BRT corridor, Broadway, was proposed for North Minneapolis in the Metropolitan Council's Transportation Policy Plan. So this time, I'd like to believe the city gets a little smarter with each project. This time the city approved the locally preferred alternative, but with conditions. The city's conditions were that Penn Avenue North and Emerson Fremont Avenues North should be added to the it says BRT network. It should say arterial BRT or enhanced bus network. Hennepin County stepped up and committed to make Penn Avenue a community works project, which we appreciate. And finally, we achieved a 3-agency agreement between the city council and the city, county, and Met Council to jointly fund a transit study of West Broadway in hopes that West Broadway could be our second streetcar line. Why would we want rail on Broadway and enhanced bus on corridors like Penn and Emerson Fremont? Well, in part, you can see it by taking a bike ride or a bus tour down those corridors. What you'll notice is that there's a lot of residential, even some low-density residential along Penn Avenue and Fremont Avenue. And when I say low density, I mean on an urban standard, which is all high density. I don't mean on a suburban standard. By contrast, you look at West Broadway and you see a corridor which has lots of commercial industrial property and the potential to grow more. It is on that type of land, with those types of land uses and that type of zoning where we can attract development. And what we know is that investors and developers want certainty. Unlike buses, which have shown little or no impact on development, rail investments are uniquely effective at attracting new housing and job opportunities. Developers and job creators have not invested based on proximity to bus lines, which could easily be rerouted. Investors and developers have expressed that they want certainty, the certainty provided by rail, by LRT or modern streetcars or hybrids in between the two. Other cities have already shown that they can catalyze private sector investment and encourage sustainable development when the public makes a permanent investment. So again, and North Minneapolis is a good microcosm of the entire city, there are corridors where we don't want to have to wait for rail. Rail takes time, a lot of time, and those corridors would be Penn and Emerson Fremont. At the same time, there are other corridors where we want to aim high, even if the intended outcome takes longer. It shouldn't be any surprise that these are the corridors within North Minneapolis that we prioritized. If you look at the city's primary transit network that we adopted as part of Access Minneapolis in 2009, you see exactly those corridors. The development of this, credited to Steve Kotke's department, is based on ridership primarily, but also development potential. I do want to emphasize that our advocacy to the Met Council on behalf of North Minneapolis is not just the highest performing corridors like Broadway, Penn, and Emerson Fremont, as well as Bottineau LRT. The city also supports comprehensive improvements in frequency, security, and amenities on all bus routes in North Minneapolis, and there's a lot of them. These are all the bus routes in North Minneapolis, and you'll see the size of the dots correspond to the amount of ridership, and you'll see that Emerson, Fremont, and Penn Avenue stand out as being very high ridership corridors. But the other corridors are also efficient corridors and are worthy of further investment. Our advocacy to the Met Council is ongoing. Some of this was talked about within the context of Southwest LRT and Southwest LRT mediation, but our work is ongoing and includes things like public safety. We've sought Met Council commitments for additional cameras and call boxes in racially concentrated areas of poverty. Everybody deserves to be safe on the train or on the bus. We'd like to install security camera software and associated hardware necessary to allow the Minneapolis Police Department to receive live feeds from Met Council security cameras. The more these agencies are integrated and taking advantage of all the technology that exists, the safer we can make our constituents. We've also sought, but not yet received, a commitment of frequency at the Van Wyck station. We've asked for a commitment of 10 to 15 minutes during weekday rush hour and midday periods, and at least 20 to 30 minutes during evening periods, Saturdays and Sundays. I would note that Van Wyck goes through north and south now. It is a connected corridor, and we have developed options that we have submitted to the Met Council for how that service could serve both North and South Minneapolis and connect communities to jobs in both. Of course, we want heated bus shelters and bus stop amenities. The city's position is that Met Council should meet 100% of the need in their identified racially concentrated areas of poverty, or RCAPs. The city's position is that that Met Council should adopt a single standard for defining when a bus shelter is warranted, not two separate standards for urban and suburban communities. Beyond RCAPs, shelters should be placed based on need and available space, not civic boundaries. Public Works staff would want me to point out at this juncture that there may be bus stop locations where ridership warrants a full-size bus shelter, but it would be too large within the available space and must be declined in favor of smaller amenities. We're obviously not at that point right now. You can't decline what isn't offered, but there are times when you might need to decline because the neighboring land uses aren't appropriate. But we would, of course, want the best that can be achieved within the available space. Up to this point, I have been talking about North Minneapolis and using North Minneapolis as a microcosm for where these different modes are most appropriate, where LRT, regular buses, where arterial BRT, where streetcars can be most successful. That's part of the reason that we've been focusing on the north side up to now. Frankly, we've also been doing it because much of the community concern about adding equity to the Southwest LRT planning process has focused on North Minneapolis because of the very high expectations the Met Council has set for what Southwest LRT could do for North Minneapolis neighborhoods. But it is critically important to note, and this is where I will transition to the city as a whole, there are low-income residents and communities of color throughout Minneapolis. And just like the north side, there are also high-performing transit corridors on the south side and east side, which are clearly underserved compared to their potential. This includes Central Avenue Northeast, University Avenue Southeast, Chicago Avenue, Hennepin Avenue, Nicollet Avenue, Franklin Avenue, and the Midtown Greenway Lake Street corridor. What do all these urban transit corridors have in common? And when I say all these corridors, I mean both north side, south side, east side. These corridors are the most efficient and least subsidized corridors in the entire transit system. Mass transit, in order to be cost-effective, as cost-effective as possible, requires mass. It's in the name, mass transit. Requires mass or density. The city of Minneapolis, by embracing density along transit corridors, is providing Metro Transit with its least expensive customers. Investments in transit improvements along these already dense streets are very likely to be cost-effective. By contrast, it costs Metro Transit much more money on a per-mile basis to provide transit service in sparsely populated communities where buses must travel more miles using more gas to pick up fewer passengers. So, how do we serve the communities left behind by the Southwest? We've talked about serving the communities left behind by BOT now. How do we serve the communities that have been left behind by the Southwest LRT process? As we talked about, the city reluctantly agreed to support the Kenilworth corridor for Southwest LRT. By routing through Kenilworth and avoiding dense corridors, Southwest LRT provided fewer benefits for Minneapolis neighborhoods. This is the third of 3 maps we've shown that indicate the limitations of the Kenilworth alignment. You've already seen mode share and poverty, mode share and density. This is poverty. And you'll see that if we want to serve low-income communities, we need to look beyond Southwest LRT. So after Kenilworth, the city redoubled its ongoing efforts to bring a modern streetcar to Nicollet and rail to the Midtown Greenway. Let me talk about the Nicollet Central streetcar briefly. This is a 3.4-mile modern streetcar line. It's projected to carry over 9,000 daily riders. While the city hopes to extend the streetcar further north and further south, the first segment described above was chosen in part, and when I say described above, let me just say briefly, the starter segment will go from Kmart at Lake Street, down Nicollet Avenue, down Nicollet Mall, across the Hennepin Avenue Bridge, and into North Minneapolis, the Northeast Minneapolis. The Northeast Minneapolis location has not quite been determined because it depends on the location of the operations and maintenance facility. So why did we select that segment when we studied a much longer segment of Nicollet and Central? Why did we select that segment to go first? Well, in part because of equity concerns. Where were the greatest percentage of people without vehicles, populations in poverty, non-white populations, and the largest number of affordable housing units? Well, they're in the segment that we chose to go first. The segment indicated with the numbers 4, 5, and 6 on the map. That's the percentage of housing units that are legally binding affordable units. We'd also notice that this map shows that we chose the segment with, again, the population living without vehicles, populations living in poverty, and the non-white populations of that larger corridor. Since we've talked about this recently, I'm going to skip over a few of these bullet points. You know that we've adopted the LPA, that we're working on the EA, and that we have a value capture district that would cover about a third of the cost of this project. The city very much appreciates the equity advocates' support for adoption of a regional streetcar policy, and the city commits to work with advocacy organizations, the City of St. Paul, Met Council, and others in order to achieve this. It's important to note the City of St. Paul is doing very similar work to the City of Minneapolis, and that is a key alliance for us if we expect to serve our corridors. Their corridors are very similar to ours in terms of the percentages of low-income populations, communities of color, and the means by which we will serve those communities. Last thought about Nicollet Central Modern Streetcar. Nicollet Central Modern Streetcar will provide a new spine through downtown Minneapolis. This is key. Getting a rail corridor through downtown is difficult. Hiawatha LRT built tracks through downtown, which could subsequently be used by Central LRT. It'll also be used by by Southwest LRT and by Botno LRT. At that point, after those 4 LRT lines have come to downtown Minneapolis, all riding on the tracks on Fifth Avenue, Fifth is full. Fifth is full, it can't accommodate more. If we want there to be more rail stops in the city of Minneapolis, beyond the 2 stops on Botno, in a post-Southwest LRT world, there will only be 2 additional rail stops in the city of Minneapolis on the Botno line, unless we build a new spine. In a similar manner to how Hiawatha paved the way, laid the tracks for Central, Southwest, and Botno, Nicollet Central can do the same thing for extensions further up Central, further down Nicollet, and of course, Broadway, a future West Broadway streetcar. A West Broadway streetcar could not come to the edge of downtown Minneapolis and stop in order to succeed. It would have to run through downtown Minneapolis in order to succeed. Enhanced bus on Chicago Avenue. Even before city negotiations over Botno LRT, Metro Transit had already agreed that enhanced bus on Chicago Avenue was part of their transportation plans. Chicago Avenue is currently served by the slow number 5 bus. With the addition of the Emerson-Fremont corridor on the north side, also served by the number 5 bus, to Metro Transit's enhanced bus network, it makes sense to upgrade service on both the north side and south side sections of the corridor at the same time, if possible. If possible, meaning if funding permits. And we'll talk about that at the end. Quickly on the Midtown corridor, you've heard about this recently. The alternatives analysis was completed in early 2014. It studied both Midtown and Lake Street. The PAC recommended a dual alternative of rail in the Midtown Greenway and enhanced bus on Lake Street. The rail component would be a 4.4 mile corridor between the Blue Line and the Green Line LRT. It would operate in an exclusive guideway, mostly grade separated from the street grid, with an estimated one-way travel time of 13 minutes. Keep in mind today it's over 40 minutes between Blue Line and Green Line. Potential rail vehicles could include either a single modern streetcar or a single car light rail vehicle. Orange Line BRT. Orange Line BRT will provide high-speed, all-day transit access on 35W from Minneapolis to Burnsville. It would include stations in Minneapolis at 46th Street, which already exists, Lake Street, and which does not exist, and downtown stops on Marquette and 2nd Avenues. Among other benefits, Orange Line BRT will provide Minneapolis residents much better access to job opportunities in the southern suburbs. I just took the 535 the other day, and it's not nearly what it could be if it was a full BRT service. So what is standing in the way of full BRT service? The primary thing standing in the way is that the Orange Line BRT needs a station at Lake Street, a real station, not what you see here. This is 2014, and you'll see these, they're really bleak. This is not encouraging people to use this transit service. Please keep in mind that 35W is the most well-used transit corridor in Minnesota. That may change as Hiawatha, at least it was as of 2 years ago. With Hiawatha and Central growing, they're in a comparable range. 35W is a huge transit corridor, and right now you have this little concrete barrier which protects your shoes, I guess, and you have the staircase which is inaccessible. Fortunately, we have a plan and a broad consensus among agencies about what to do next. This is just one of the pictures of what the station at Lake Street could look like in the future. This will be coming to the City Council for approval in early 2015. And of course, again, it has been suggested that this project, as recently as a CTIB meeting last month, it was suggested that this is only for the benefit of the city of Minneapolis. That's not even remotely the case. Until this new station is built, Orange Line BRT cannot be fully built because the station needs to be in the center lane. Otherwise, BRT either can't operate or it would have to bypass, BRT would have to bypass the low-income and communities of color along Lake Street, which is obviously a completely unacceptable option on one of the busiest transit corridors in Minnesota. Again, I would want to provide the same disclaimer that I provided when we talked about high-performing corridors on the north side. We do have targeted investments that we support on those south side and east side corridors like Nicollet Central, Chicago, Midtown Lake, and 35W. But of course, the city has long supported comprehensive improvements in frequency, security, and amenities on all bus routes in south side and east side locations. And the city commits to work with advocates to advance that. I'd like to return before concluding to Southwest LRT and talk about transit-oriented development. As we alluded to earlier, the prospects for development are enhanced or limited by the inherent characteristics of station locations. I know that seems obvious to point out, but it needs to be, we need to remind ourselves of it because there is a competing view that LRT is so transformative you can put it anywhere and you're going to get development. That has not been the city's experience. Although we do believe that LRT stations can be transformative, rail stations should be accessible, they should be easy to find, they should have available land for development and job growth. The unanticipated and unwelcome continuation of an active freight line corridor will also inhibit development at several Southwest stations. Despite these challenges, the city will continue to promote economic development. Other than the 21st Street station, the city expects some level of development at each of the Minneapolis stations. Except for Royalston, which is downtown, which could develop very quickly, the city doesn't expect development on the scale or speed of Central Corridor. So we have a little bit of time, but we shouldn't rest easy. In particular, we should not rest easy as it relates to the Van Wyck Station area. This is perhaps where the delta of public investment can make the greatest difference for the overall success of the transit system and for low-income communities and communities of color along the Southwest LRT line. It's a very high priority for the city. We have already invested, all of my remaining comments will be about Van Wyck, to be clear. We have already invested substantial staff time and a total of over $22 million in federal, county, and city resources for Van Wyck Boulevard to create a new connection between North and South Minneapolis and reweave together neighborhoods long divided by freight rail and I-394. Developable land is available at this station, unlike several other Southwest LRT stations, although we need to recognize that poor soils will likely limit residential development. Some of the unique factors in the Van Wyck Station area include the presence of the impound lot and the possibility of future passenger rail, heavy passenger rail, coming to downtown Minneapolis. So let's talk about those two issues. Public Works and CPED are working on plans to shrink and improve the impound lot. 3 options have been presented to the community that would improve the customer experience at the impound lot, which could use improvement, make the impound lot a much better neighbor, reduce the overall size of the impound lot substantially, and free up to 6 to 10 acres for possible reuse or redevelopment. These improvements are long overdue. We have been talking about and studying the impound lot and its possible locations for a long time, including 2001 and 2009 studies. Efforts to improve the impound lot have been delayed by a desire to relocate it to another location, but an appropriate and viable location available for purchase has never been identified. As we consider this question, it is important to ask the question, where is industrially zoned land in the city of Minneapolis? Well, it's mostly in other parts of North and Northeast Minneapolis, and none of those communities, which already contain locally unwanted land uses, are likely to welcome the impound lot to their neighborhood. Having talked to council members about this issue in the last week or so, I would just note that none of the 13 council members have raised their hand and said, I would like the impound lot in my neighborhood. It has been suggested that the city doesn't need an impound lot. This has also been studied. That's not the case here. Tow around the corner doesn't work here. And all you need to do is anticipate or think back to the last snow emergency. There are many places in the city, many places where if you were to attempt to tow around the corner, what would you find when you brought that car around the corner? You would find streets filled with cars and no place to put a car that you were towing around the corner. We do need an impound lot. The good news is we don't need an impound lot as big as the one we have today. Public Works has developed 3 options, and you can see bigger versions of this in the paper report. In each of these options, the yellow border indicates a future smaller impound lot than what we have today. The white borders indicate land we could free up for development if the city makes a decision. As you look at this question, and as our CPED and Public Works experts have looked at this question, one of the questions they ask is, what are the neighboring land uses, and are those land uses changing? And I just want to point out to, if I was using this, I could point to the screen, but I'll just point to the triangle that is pointed to the right-hand side in all 3 of these options, the triangle that, that points east. At that point, directly north, where you see that little red dot that says A, the property just to the east of that dot is an Xcel Power substation. They've made it clear to the city of Minneapolis they're not going anywhere. Just to the west, to the north of that triangle, is a large piece of property owned by the Minneapolis Public Schools where they store all of their, not all of their, they store school buses. They store them outside. They have not indicated they have any desire to move. In the past, they've indicated a desire to expand. They're not going anywhere. So it begs the question, even if we were to free up that space for development, would development actually occur? Our Public Works and CPED staff do not believe that's at all likely. What is the experience of being towed in the city of Minneapolis? Well, today it's not a transit accessible location. I've certainly heard of stories of people being unable to find a friend to hitch a ride to the impound lot who ended up taking a cab at expense to go pick up their cab from the impound lot. It is worth pausing for a moment and considering who gets towed to the impound lot. Well, it's not likely to be wealthy individuals who have a 2-car garage and are able to keep their automobiles off the street. It's likely to be people who have their car on the street because that's their available space. Within that context, it's important to note the impound lot will be in the future within reasonable walking distance of the Van White station, which means that the impound lot will be transit accessible in the future in a way that it's not today. The new transit line will improve the ability of impound lot users to recover their impounded vehicles. So our choice before us is to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or to move ahead to develop the land closest to LRT and closest to the Van White Boulevard. A second issue is intercity passenger rail coming to the city of Minneapolis. MnDOT, in consultation with the Intercity Passenger Rail Forum, which includes both city and county representatives, have developed a plan for high-speed passenger rail service to Chicago, Duluth, St. Cloud, and many other destinations. This has not been the most high priority work for the city of Minneapolis. Our highest priority work has been focused on all-day service for our constituents. But of course, we do want to be a good regional partner because while our constituents might have daily needs getting to jobs in downtown Minneapolis or in the suburbs, we support these high-speed connections, which would spur economic development and job growth in the city of Minneapolis. Such projects would also, I'm talking about heavy rail projects, would also foster equity by providing new ways for people to reach jobs and competitive alternative to air travel. Such projects would also provide construction jobs. We believe it's in the best interest of the city and its residents for such passenger rail lines to stop directly in downtown Minneapolis at the Target Field Station, as close as possible to provide transportation access and more choices to the populations that we seek to serve. Both Union Depot in downtown St. Paul and Target Field in downtown Minneapolis were built for this purpose. It has been suggested that we wouldn't need to do this. We could simply have all heavy passenger rail stop only in downtown St. Paul. That would significantly inconvenience residents of Minneapolis and the entire West Metro area who would be looking for shorter overall travel times to their destinations. If we were to suggest that anybody who lives in Minneapolis, in order to take a train to Chicago or Duluth, would need to add a 45-minute trip on the Green Line to downtown St. Paul, frankly, that would beg a question of consistency on the city's part. If we were to adopt that position, why did we support the construction of Target Field Station, including city dollars and city staff time? Again, Target Field Station was built for this purpose. It was not built to handle LRT. It's not the biggest LRT station in Minneapolis. Nicollet Avenue is. It was not built simply because there's a baseball facility there. There's a football facility on the other end. The distinguishing characteristic of Target Field Station is that that's where heavy rail will also stop in Minneapolis. Having rail amenities like that serve city residents comes with certain burdens like rail layover facilities. The Hiawatha Blue Line LRT required an operations and maintenance facility on the south side of Minneapolis between the Franklin and Cedar Riverside stations, but the overall benefit to the city and its residents is quite clear. Finally, at the Van Wyck station, it is important to note that uncertainty is what could hinder development. The city strongly supports sustainable, dense, and equitable development near the Van Wyck station that promotes equity and job growth. The biggest impediments to moving forward with such development are polluted and swampy land, uncertainty regarding Southwest LRT, and uncertainty regarding any future passenger rail layover facility. So, to address that, the city has worked to develop a plan which reserves a smaller area for passenger rail layover, to balance the need for longer-term development of passenger rail service and also near-term development opportunities. The city restrained the requests of MnDOT to a smaller area of approximately what we think would likely be needed. Another way to express is that the city seeks to accommodate rail projects to, for example, Chicago, Duluth, and St. Cloud, but not at this time projects to Wilmer or Eau Claire, which seem less realistic in the reasonably anticipated future. So last, I want to show you that the plan that has been developed by our Public Works and CPED folks. The plan depicts a smaller 4-acre area reserved for future rail layover, as shown below, which would provide over 6 acres on Linden Yards East for near-term development, closer to where the Van Wyck Southwest LRT station will be. Only the easterly portion of Linden Yards East will be available for future study as a potential option for a regional commuter and high-speed rail layover facility, as shown on the next slide. Let me just say, so I can show this to you while I read it, the Cedar Lake Trail will run continuously through Linden Yards site, and any future rail layover facility would be designed, enclosed, landscaped, and mitigated for noise and air quality impacts. Even within these constraints described above, the city strongly believes that there is a lot of potential at the Van Wyck station. The city is committed to work with the Harrison and Bryn Mawr neighborhoods to achieve a shared vision, ideally of mixed-use, mixed-income development, including affordable rental and homeownership options. The common theme I would note between both the impound lot situation and the Linden Yards East situation is that 100% solution is not possible. But, and it comes out to the same percentages roughly speaking, a 60% solution is possible, where we could free up a great deal of land. If we are willing to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That is something both of these issues have in common. Here's something that the two issues do not have in common. They have a different timeline. The city is not on the verge of doing anything on the eastern portion of Linden Yards East. We're anticipating a future need. As it relates to the impound lot, the need is now. The facility is not a good facility, not what it could be, not what it should be. And the longer we wait to make a decision, the less likely we are to be able to anticipate the development that we hope will occur. So the city's hope would be that in order to get the best results out of this, and mind you, with 60% of land freed up, railroad land freed up around Linden Yards, and 60% of land freed up around the impound lot, there is no shortage of available land to develop. Our hope would be that we could work collaboratively with the neighborhoods and make the most of this opportunity. Finally, while the bulk of the requests that came to us were related to transit service, understandably, we were also asked about pedestrian and bike access. And this is an arena where the city was able to respond directly through the Southwest LRT mediation process. In that process, the city sought and secured $30 million in accessibility improvements at Southwest stations located in Minneapolis. For time's sake, I did not include those in my PowerPoint presentation, but they are at the back of the report. $30 million of improvements. The city views those as necessary mitigations for both the alignment choice and the unwelcome presence of freight rail. These pedestrian and bicycle accessibility components are an important step towards our shared development goals. That package includes a pedestrian bridge from the Van White station directly to Bryn Mawr Meadows. That is something that Council Members Glidden, Council Member Reich, the mayor, and all worked on in the course of that negotiation. It's very important for our development hopes at that station. But again, for these investments to be most successful, the city, park board, and neighborhood groups must work together. Finally, our region is way behind our peer regions in the development of modern transit systems. This was brought to us in sharp relief with our recent experience of Rail Evolution coming to town. The difference between our peer cities and us is funding. The 2015 legislative session will consider a transportation funding bill. And within that, Minneapolis will support new revenue, and Minneapolis has a record of supporting new revenue for a comprehensive transit build-out. Within that, Minneapolis will push for a bill that supports a sustainable and equitable system. That's the end of my portion of the presentation. Mr. Chair, would you prefer that I take questions now? I want to note that John Wirchus from Public Works and Beth Grossen from CPED are here, in particular in anticipation of questions that might be asked about the impound lot or Linden Yards East. So they're here, or we could proceed through the remaining slides and take all the questions at the end.
I think we can take the questions per topic, and so if you would remain at the podium in case there are questions.
Sure.
I'll begin with Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wagenius, the Nicollet streetcar line, I mean, what's the projected cost on that?
On Midtown?
Yep. The Nicollet streetcar line.
Nicollet, I'm sorry. $200 million.
$200 million, so about $50,000 or $50 million per mile, roughly, right?
A little bit less than that, but yes.
Okay. And I'm just wondering. I mean, this theory that if we put rail on something and then these stations happen to be there, that development will just happen. And I'm just thinking like $50 million for West Broadway, for the 2.5 miles that is on West Broadway. I mean, it's a little bit over $100 million. I mean, $100 million would do like a lot of good for West Broadway, if not even just the streetcar. I mean, just if we found $100 million and threw it at West Broadway, I mean, I think we'd develop some great things there. And so, I mean, I'm just wondering, is this theory or is it just, I mean, is this real? Like the streetcar is going to transform West Broadway? Because, yesterday I was at a meeting with Cub Foods and, I mean, they're saying they're struggling. And, the main issue for their struggle isn't transit. I mean, their main struggle is the security issue. I mean, it's just unsafe and people are doing bad things there. And so I'm wondering, can we get to a point where we can make the place safe and then things will happen? Because what I'm worried about is we can build an awesome streetcar line. It will cost, a ton of money and it's just not safe. And so folks are not just going to develop there. So on top of, having a great streetcar line, we're just going to still carry the same reputation, which is, a bad reputation, and nobody's going to want to develop there. So, I mean, how do we balance all that stuff?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, first of all, let me make clear from my earlier comments, there are two theories. One theory is that you can put rail anywhere and development will just happen. That's not something that anybody that I'm aware of in the city staff believes in. Our experience and our experience with other cities says that yes, you need a rail transit stop in order to have that kind of catalytic effect, but that's not the only thing you need. You do need safety. You do need accessibility. You do need the qualities that we talked about earlier. So I want to make clear the theory you can just plop it down and it happens is not a theory that the city agrees to. Let me speak to the Nicollet Central project.
Mr. Guinness, if I can just add to that list, market readiness is also something that we recognize.
Absolutely, market readiness. And frankly, that's part of the reason that we're moving forward with Nicollet Central first, because we've talked to the developers who are willing to invest, and they've given us a very positive reaction to Nicollet Central. And we need look no further than the Central Corridor LRT line between the two downtowns for evidence of what rail transit can do. We are experiencing, and I don't think she's here today, but we could bring Hyla Mays, who's been tracking the development impact along Central Corridor, and it has been remarkable. Consider it has been remarkable regardless, but particularly considering that much of the development happened in anticipation of the line, not even waiting for revenue service to begin. So on 95% of the corridors in the city of Minneapolis, our work towards streetcars has led us to conclude that buses should remain on 95% of the corridors, that is likely to get the best that we're going to get out of them. It's only on a few key corridors where we think that, again, looking at the example of other cities, as well as our own experience along the Central Corridor line, that we could get more than an equal return on investment for the dollars we put in. Finally, you made a point about priorities, a very valid point about priorities. And it's important to note when you look at all of the regions in the city that took the modern streetcar technology seriously earlier than the city of Minneapolis did, and got money from the federal government, thinking of cities like Denver, Portland, Tucson, St. Louis, Salt Lake City just opened a streetcar. The money they got from the federal government for their streetcar projects, money we could have gotten, our tax dollars going to DC, going to their communities and not to ours, could not have been spent on public safety in the city of Minneapolis. It was a transit pot of money, and the same thing will be true of a half-cent or three-quarter-cent Metro-wide sales tax. That money can't be spent on safety improvements. That's going to come out of property taxes, local government aid, and the city's general fund. So should we choose transit over police services? No, but that's not the choice we're making. The choice we're making is to be present and assertive within the context of state and federal funding to ensure that transit dollars, at least a reasonable portion of transit dollars, a fair and equitable portion, are invested in the city of Minneapolis.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can just have a follow-up question, and this might be a little bit complicated, but you talked about market readiness or having developers lined up, let's say, if there was a proposed streetcar line on West Broadway. And so what if we couldn't line up that development? I mean, would that mean that the city would just bypass West Broadway and find some other line, or would we just plop it down just because? I mean, how does that happen?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, I want to note that we have not yet done the study on West Broadway. The city has high hopes based on the land uses and zoning around West Broadway, the fact that West Broadway is connected to North Washington, where there's obviously already market readiness, which could potentially be extended. That's something that we've seen in other cities where there's a portion of the corridor where market readiness is obvious, and there's a portion further out from downtown where market readiness is not obvious but could be extended. But most importantly, I want to emphasize Nicollet Central and West Broadway are at two entirely different points in the process. Nicollet Central has gone through an alternatives analysis. Through its EA, some funding has already been identified. I wouldn't want to presume the results of the West Broadway study. And I assume that all of the agencies will take seriously any information, encouraging or discouraging, that comes out of that study.
Yeah, thank you. I think the clarification in the process discrepancy is important to note, and the amount of process that's needed to continue the analysis of West Broadway, both from its economic impact and its transit feasibility.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Yang, you're done. Councilmember Gordon.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a small comment on the impound lot, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a question, because I know we did look at other locations, but ever since I was unable to volunteer some area in Ward 2 to become the new impound lot, I thought about this problem a little bit, and I also feel like it is a great sacrifice of really great developable space to have it where it is, although I support this idea of shrinking it and upgrading it. But I also had a thought of, we can't tow around the corner, but maybe we could have a few locations and some sites spread around the city where there might be a potential. And maybe we even had other public works facilities nearby, or we could service somehow in that way. And that might be something to think about for the future. It also occurred to me how often when you look at existing parking space, it's empty. There'll even be top floors of parking ramps all over, and how that would function with tow trucks. I really question that, but nevertheless, there's also surface lots we find. So maybe as we slowly keep wrestling with this problem, I certainly don't want to move it out of the city. I think that would be ridiculous. Having it at transit makes a lot of sense, but maybe looking at as fewer people need cars, and maybe there's other openings for parking other places, and just a possibility that there could be more than one in the city, maybe even 4, 5, but that's just a seed to plant. I don't want to send our public works director on another 20-year project if it doesn't lead to anything either. So we need to keep acting quickly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, actually that's not a future conversation. That is a present conversation. I would invite John Wershus or Steve Cockey to provide greater detail, but the ability to shrink the impound lot as part of the plans that they have developed includes the idea of some vehicles that are currently at the impound lot not being at the impound lot. Obviously, for the general public, we don't want them to have to guess where their car might be. But for example, police holds could be at a different location, and I believe without that, we wouldn't be able to put on the table a proposal that shrinks the impound lot as much as it does. Is John still here? John, if I said any of that incorrectly, feel free to chime in here, but I believe that is already integrated into the existing plans.
There was the knowing nod.
I'm getting a nod.
Mr. Chair, I'll confirm that is correct. As we're looking at reducing the size and the footprint of the existing impound lot, we're looking at what we can do with the placeholds, because that particular operation is a bit different than the rest of the impounding we do. So we're looking for opportunities to deal with the placeholds differently.
And it shouldn't be understated the amount of work and analysis that has gone into today and the commitment moving forward. It's a profound amount of work and analysis it's gotten us to this point and will move us forward. Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cockey, could you estimate how much money we spend per year on our road system?
Did you ask how much we spend on our road system?
Yes. I mean, our annual public works budget is something like $300 million, but a lot of that isn't for our transportation system.
Right. About 3/4 of that is associated with enterprise funds dealing with water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling. Our general fund budget, which is primarily used for our transportation system, is about $53 million.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's just one way to measure. I mean, we spend a significant amount of money per year in city, regional, state, and federal funds on our transportation system, but a very small percentage of it is on transit. So we're spending a huge amount of money per year that's not going to safety or other significant priorities on transportation. It's just mostly on car transportation. And, you know, I think it's important to increase the options that people have and invest in our transit system. I wanted to make a couple of comments. One is that just like we can't plop down a transit system, I think you made a really great point about how you can't just plop down development next to transit, even next to a station, and assume people are going to use it. And there's some really great research out there that shows that the kinds of populations that we see along our planned streetcar corridors are those that use transit. And when you plop down a suburban style office park next to a transit station, or if you put down a new apartment building or condo building that has 2 parking spaces per unit, there's research that shows people don't use transit, that they still drive in the same amount that they did before that they did if there wasn't a transit station there. And so I think it's so important, the comments that our city are making on the regional housing policy plan and the regional transportation policy plan, which really underscore the points you've made. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because I think we have a good vision now as a region in those plans that articulates that, but we are asking for some changes in the details of those plans that really, acknowledges that and make sure that our region is taking the best advantage of these transit investments, so that we're designing our systems so that people actually use the transit. And then, I just, again, wanted to say, having a population of people that 74% of whom do not own a vehicle next to transit, that is astounding. That the potential there for us to improve transportation options for that population and to build a successful transportation system with people with those rates of not owning a car near our planned transit is that's a recipe for success. And so I think we have a great plan in place, and as you've said in your presentation, just need now to find the resources to build it.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes.
Councilmember Bender's points are well taken, and I would just share an anecdote with you that you feel free to share with others. It's all about return on investment. And one of the things we know is that the market is agreeing with the points that Councilmember Bender has made. I've been at the city for, I'm in my 13th year at the city, and I recall working with then Mayor Ryback trying to pitch development at the intersection of Nicollet and Fifth, where Hiawatha and Blue Line and Green Line meet Nicollet Mall. And I recall working with pitching to developers and telling them that LRT was coming to this intersection and getting a very non-committal response, even a negative response. Oh, LRT, it's not going to make noise, is it? Fast forward to today. Today, the Nick on Fifth development is pitching to their tenants the fact that they will have an LRT station right outside their door. And we don't need to have any doubt that the developer is putting their money where their mouth is, because they are building at their own expense a second platform, so that you will notice there is a platform which has just been completed. I don't know if they've opened it yet, a few blocks away from here. It's all about return on investment. And if we put in the money into the project you were describing, Councilmember Bender, and we got the kind of private sector investment response that we're seeing on Central Corridor LRT, that is going to improve the city's tax base and provide us with the property tax base that will allow us to provide the services that people count on, including public safety.
Thank you. Any further questions? We can now wrap up the other part of the presentation.
My colleague Eric Garcia Luna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I will try to be brief and concise on these following points. None of that. Do you have that? Thank you. As we get it all set up, I just want to highlight that the items that I will be discussing are in line with the following commitments, the 2 remaining commitments that Peter made reference to, and which read as follows. 1, to engage in discussions that enhance multi-jurisdictional and private resources that will expedite development along transitways and provide economic opportunities for low-income communities and people of color. And the second one, to periodically measure and evaluate the impacts of our existing business development programs on low-income communities and people of color, and share the results with our partners to collectively improve them. The proposal, the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and Met Council commit to establishing a $50 million capital fund to support and promote entrepreneurs of color. The fund is briefly described in the equity commitments for the Southwest LRT as a flexible tool for helping train entrepreneurs on the basics of starting a business, developing business plans, and lining up investors and capital. The fund will also be used to provide gap financing, low-interest loans, and small capital grants to startups and existing businesses that wish to operate on or expand along transitway corridors. To put the response in perspective, I think it is important that we revisit the city's vision. We're all familiar with the city's vision. In March 2014, the City Council adopted a vision for the city and goals, values, and strategic directions that envision Minneapolis to be, quote, a growing and vibrant world-class city with a flourishing economy and a pristine environment where all people are safe, healthy, and have equitable opportunities for success and happiness, end of quote. The city's goals, which you have on the screen, in order to fulfill those goals and the vision will require strategies that provide every resident, regardless of race, the opportunities to grow and prosper and therefore reduce disparities among residents and neighborhoods. It is imperative that as we develop and implement strategies, both the public and private sector are engaged. The city's programs that we have in place right now to ensure that growth reaches everyone in the city without distinctions and not just part of our population, and it helps level the playing field for populations traditionally left behind. The city's business development programs are both place-based and citywide. Place-based programs, such as the Great Streets and Grow North, are located along business corridors or transitways. Citywide programs, the majority of city programs, such as the Business Technical Assistance Program, otherwise known as BTAP, partner with the nonprofit community development sector to provide services to entrepreneurs. The economic development programs are primarily targeted to overcome market failure or address a public objective. Market failure materializes, as we all know, in vacant buildings, decline in business sectors, decrease in property values, and high unemployment. This has traditionally, disproportionately, and I will add, unfortunately, affected our immigrant and minority populations. Program funding sources. The city dollars committed to this effort leverage from a number of other tools and resources devoted to supporting business growth and job creation. Funding includes millions of dollars for loan capital and business consulting provided by the Federal Community Development Financial Institutions Program and the State Urban Initiatives Program to a variety of community development organizations, as well as foundation and philanthropic contributions. The challenge is that some of this funding, as is the case of Grow North, a vital place-based program, is restricted by the Federal Community Development Block Grant. As for the rest of the programs, some have historically been able to meet demand. For example, the demand for the city's small business loan programs has not exceeded the approximately $2.2 million that is repaid each year from prior business loans and reinvested. On the other hand, available city dollars for the BTAP program previously referenced and Great Streets Business District support are typically less than half of what is requested. Further, as those are grant dollars that do not recirculate, there is always a question of whether funds at past levels will be appropriated to the program in the city's budgeting process. Therefore, having mentioned these challenges, additional resources from the proposed fund could be used towards addressing the federal limitations on Grow North, strengthening the Great Streets and BTAP programs, and ensure that resources for those grants are available to support small minority entrepreneurs. To address the limitations, if additional funding was available, it could be used to create scholarship and apprenticeship program to train minority candidates to effectively serve their communities as culturally specialized business consultants. I can tell you, having worked in the nonprofit sector, particularly in this field, I think we could use more specialized individuals to help our businesses navigate the process. Another barrier to minority entrepreneurs is the availability of assets to collateralize financing. One approach to counter this will be to create and capitalize an independent development account program as an accelerated investment savings account with a match from the equity fund for every dollar the entrepreneur puts in. Some examples on how these funds could be used are commercial rent, collateral, working capital, and inventory. Lastly, retail and restaurant enterprises are key to the vitality of a business district, but often investment in those kind of businesses is challenged by sales revenues that are significantly low and therefore insufficient to meet rent payments, particularly when new construction or significant renovation are part of the equation. A rent subsidy program created with the availability of additional funding could provide time to new businesses to become established with their customer base before full rent is charged. As far as anchor institutions goes, the City of Minneapolis participated in the planning of the anchor institution strategy currently being implemented along most of the central corridor. The strategy involved the identification of large employers along the line and identifying their need for employee training and hiring needs. The city is interested in participating in developing a workforce entrepreneurial strategy that involves anchor institutions located along transit corridors. The strategy should also identify public and private employers that may be hiring due to retirements and business expansion. The anchor institutions model of collaboration is an example of a potential initiative that may serve to enhance the economic vitality of neighborhoods connected to transit. Institutions such as hospitals and universities are dominant employers in the regional economy, but their impact is felt beyond their role. When the Southwest LRT line opens in 2019, even more of these economic centers will be accessible to Minneapolis residents. This increased access, however, is several years away. The focus on institutions along the future Southwest LRT line obscures the region's largest concentration of jobs, downtown Minneapolis. Downtown Minneapolis is home to over 130,000 jobs, many of which will open with the pending wave of retirements expected over the next several years or anticipated business growth. The City of Minneapolis looks forward to participating in the development of an anchor institution strategy for downtown Minneapolis that will connect Minneapolis residents to jobs, a market to Minneapolis that will connect residents to jobs, a market to sell their products, and a hub for economic opportunity. Possible participants in anchor institution strategy could be public agencies, such as the city and county, Hennepin County Medical Center, and large corporations with significant presence in downtown. As far as housing goes, we're proposing to maintain and expand affordable housing base. Housing choices, the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, and the Met Council commit to working with the local neighborhood associations. Private and community nonprofit housing developers such as Urban Homeworks and the City of Lakes Community Land Trust to fund the maintenance and preservation of a rich balance of housing choices that are affordable for current and future residents and workers within and near the transitway corridors. It is important that there are goals around developing mixed income communities in order to secure an equitable share of resources and opportunities for whole community development. Affordability definitions should be calibrated to median income levels for the City of Minneapolis. The City of Minneapolis commits to a strategy of preventing involuntary displacement of low-wealth communities from transitways. In partnership with neighborhood associations and private and community nonprofit housing developers, the City of Minneapolis has been engaged in preserving and maintaining owner-occupied and rental housing, assisting in the development of new housing, The city and its public and private partners have invested in housing as a key element in stabilizing neighborhoods. The city supports, what the city supports, oh, that slide is out, but anyway, the data consistently shows Minneapolis median income being lower than that of the metro area as a whole. If we were to strictly use the federal required units at 50% of area median income for all new housing development, adequate housing, affordable to our poorest residents, which I should emphasize again, it's usually people of color or immigrants, will be unavailable. To address this problem, the city involved housing projects, development projects, are required to provide units to households at 30% of AMI. Proximity to transit is an essential component of housing, affordability, and access to jobs. But the transit assets can create market pressures that push out low-income residents. The city has worked to maintain long-term rental affordability. Additionally, the provision of home ownership to households at 50% of the area median income is paramount to providing housing across the entire continuum. The city has partnered with organizations like Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity and the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, as previously said. We have also approved a contract for deed policy that creates another tool that fosters the affordable homeownership experience. The city has financed 2,604 units of rental housing for a variety of incomes and 188 units of ownership housing, and stabilized an additional 2,456 units of housing for low-income residents in the past 5 years. Just to summarize it again, the city is interested in continuing supporting the availability of housing to fulfill demand at different levels of income, which will help support ownership among people of color and the immigrant community. Thank you.
Any questions per this part of the presentation? Councilmember Yang.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garcia Luna, just, with regards to increasing homeownership amongst people of color, I mean, we have a lot of empty, vacant homes up in North Minneapolis. I mean, what's the plan?
Miles Mercer was in the room, I thought, who could be probably the best person to answer that question. I don't know if Jean wants to add something to that. Oh.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, unfortunately, I don't feel qualified to speak to a question about housing policy on the north side. And unfortunately, I don't see anyone from our housing division in CPAD here.
Okay. Well, I'd love to see a plan at some point.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Yang. There's been the Green Homes North, and as you are well aware, during the crisis in mortgage, when we had the mortgage foreclosures, there was a strategy developed where a nonprofit development corporation was established. We tried to buy the city working in so-called First Look program, tried to preserve that housing, get it to owner-occupied and rental. So we'll get some more information, but I know the city's been very active in trying to develop owner-occupied and rental housing on the north side. I don't have all the details, but I'll get them to you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Comments? I should note. Oh.
Just quickly, I'm being told that Alfred will be the best person to answer those questions, and we're happy to follow up on that.
Health report, very good, thank you. That we've been, in addition to the full complement of committee members, because of the very importance and comprehensive nature of this topic, we had been joined by Councilmember Goodman, who had been very involved in these issues for quite some time. Councilmember Borsami was here previously, and Councilmember Fry is here as well. So this is a very important topic. I would say that it was spurred in part because of the $1.5 billion transit project and issues that came from that. Though these are conversations we've had in part for quite some time. These are not many of these not new policies, but they really come into a very focused spotlight. And I would say silos that would be sort of created housing, transit, that sort of certainly have been brought together. And I think that's something that we as a city have been a leader in, being more involved in, say, Met Council and regional planning. The siloification of these topics has been pretty pronounced over time. We're trying to break that down. That is happening. I would say that we take a leadership role, or as Mr. Wiggins would say, an advocacy role in that area, and have been pushing that along. I think that's a very important framework to start from. Mr. Ranieri thanked a lot of people. I would just echo those thanks of all the work that came in. The presenters, you did an incredible job. This not only was spurred by a conversation around a transit investment, it was spurred by our partners in the community asking questions. And I would say that the response that was developed today was very direct to those questions that were raised from our community leaders. I would say it was also appropriately comprehensive. This was not a gloss over. This was taken very seriously, and the presentation today was lengthy, I grant, but important. And I think it's a profound platform for how we move and build a city, an equitable city, not just for certain parts, but for all parts of the city. And I think that was very well woven in by today's presentation. I appreciated much of it. Any further comments or conversation? If not, I will move to receive and file this presentation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. Thank you. Thanks for all the work. We are adjourned.